Introduction. As a Christian who is a strict vegetarian, i.e. vegan, as a result of my faith in Christ Jesus, the response from professing Christians has been very interesting. Generally, they will attempt to persuade you to participate in their eating of animals with very weak arguments from futility or cultural traditions. Often, they will label vegans with crazy labels such as calling all vegans New Agers, witches, Satanists, Illuminati agents, Luciferians, false teachers, New World Order puppets, and all manner of fanciful evil labels. This is done most often to try to silence Christian vegans from speaking about compassion towards all life, because this helps the animal eater to soothe their conscience from hearing anything that would cause them to have to consider the righteousness or unrighteousness of their choices. I did not grow up in a vegan or vegetarian household. I do not even remember it ever being discussed. The only people I knew who went on a plant-based diet did so to lose weight, not because they wanted to live compassionate lives, which caused the least amount of animal suffering and misery in the world. Even among the animal flesh eaters I grew up around, it was common knowledge that a plant-based diet would help one lose weight quickly. Even at that, it was seen as something extreme to do and something to only do for a short period of time to lose weight. No one ever stopped to consider the implications of how veganism must be a better diet if they were able to lose fat and feel better when cutting animal products out of their diets. The reality is that much of Christendom is intertwined with the eating of animals. Principles like mercy, justice, love, and compassion have been supplanted with the desire for the flesh of living beings. Many have even made it a bizarre tenet of their faith that you must eat the flesh of other living beings. Quote, God put them here for us to eat, unquote, is right up there with John 3:16 in the minds of many professing Christians. It is quite sad to see how many put their bellies and desires for the flesh of animals above Christian love. Philippians 3:18-19 says, quote, The many walk of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who mind earthly things. Unquote. It took many decades of life before I saw the error of my way and became a vegan. I did not become a vegan based on peer pressure or to fit in with a certain crowd. I did not even know a single vegan when I chose to cease eating animal flesh and any animal-based products, including eggs and dairy. I did not become a vegan from seeing documentaries like Earthlings or seeing the horrific animal abuse footage commonly smuggled from the animal agriculture industry. I could not even watch such videos because they broke my heart before I became a vegan. Such videos are even more heartbreaking now that I am aware that the immense harm and cruelty humans are inflicting upon animals are not isolated incidents. Rather, they are the commonly accepted practices in animal farming. My decision to become a vegan was one flowing naturally from a heart of compassion. Up till that point, I had loved eating animal flesh, from eels to chickens to cows and all kinds of other animals. I did not ever reassess my choice of eating the flesh of animals, and it was so ingrained into my subconscious mind as a habit that I never even questioned it. I was not out killing the animals I was eating, nor was I observing their suffering caused by my choice of diet and lifestyle. Eating a banana or eating a chicken breast did not seem to be any different. It was all just food to me. I would have been the first person to stop someone from abusing a cow or chicken, and yet I was comfortable hypocritically letting others abuse cows and chickens for my own eating pleasure. While I proclaimed myself a Christian, to the animals suffering and going to slaughter for my meals and clothing, I was nothing more than a child of the devil. I reasoned that the cows and other animals were killed humanely and that they were put here for us to eat. Looking back on that mindset, it is clear how delusional and perverse that way of thinking truly is. I am ashamed that I did not have the moral courage or intelligence to challenge my animal flesh eating ways earlier than I did. This tradition of animal flesh eating was not even something that came to my mind as something to seriously question or challenge. I cannot undo my past carnist eating habits, but I can challenge the good people who will listen to this book. I believe that many who would listen to a book like this already have a conviction in their hearts that they may need to make a change to veganism, but they have the traditions of men and popular carnist theology to undo before they can feel comfortable going vegan. I do not believe that most people desire to harm animals. There are a few malicious people that simply have no mercy for animals, but most are simply following traditions of men that are endorsed by their religion, family, and culture. The average person shudders at the sight of the cruelty that goes on in animal agriculture, but they seem to be programmed to stop short of ceasing from their support of that cruelty. I do not believe this is malicious. Rather, it is the product of deep-rooted subconscious programming that can make people feel justified living out ethical contradictions like that. It was not until a few years into my Christian vegan life that I decided to read some of the theological books on Christian veganism. While there are very few in existence, the majority of these books simply sought to erase passages of the Bible that they felt disagreed with veganism. Some choose to just explain everything they could not explain into allegories. A few others have so little to do with the Bible, you could scarcely call what they were promoting Christian veganism. This book is completely different from all the other vegan books in existence. It is not boring scholarship written to impress fellow scholars, nor is it sloppily thrown together diatribes defending veganism with no concern for biblical truth. Due to the underwhelming offerings that I could find about veganism from a Christian perspective, I decided to write this book. It is the book I wish I would have had when I first came to Jesus, because I certainly would have become a vegan then as well if I knew the information that is contained in this book. I've tried to be very thorough and go through every single verse that could bring about a question from the concerned Christian who is considering adopting a compassionate, plant-based diet and vegan lifestyle. Where there is a subject that needs to be dealt with, such as animal sacrifices, I will not deal with every single verse possibly related to that subject because it will be too repetitive. For the sake of brevity, I will deal with the main passages on any given subject and cover that subject thoroughly. I have also put a section in chapter 64 that deals with questions that a believer may have that are not directly related to any verse of scripture in particular. I hope that this thoroughness is appreciated and helps you to have the eyes of your understanding enlightened. Ephesians 1:18. I have dealt with all the supposed problem verses that non-vegans commonly use to promote eating animals and using their bodies for clothing and products. I have attempted to ensure this book is a complete resource on the subject of veganism from a Christian perspective. Jude 22-23 says, quote, "And of some have compassion, making a difference, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh." Unquote. With this book, I have tried to have compassion in everything I write, but in some places there will be hard sayings. You may have an initial reaction to respond like the disciples did at one point at Jesus, saying, "This is a hard saying, who can hear it?" John 6:60. I really want people to consider their ways. Many will never even stop to ponder their ways until something shakes them awake and causes them to reflect on their life. Everything in this audiobook is spoken in love for both the listener and the animals that the listener should be compassionate towards. As I stated earlier, I truly do not believe that most people want to harm animals, nor do I believe that they have really taken much time to consider the impact that their diet and the products they use have on animals, the environment, and their own consciousness. Proverbs 15:12 says, quote, "A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise." Unquote. Amos 5:10 says, quote, "They hate him that rebuketh in the gate, and they abhor him that speaketh uprightly." Unquote. I also do not believe that anyone who would listen to a book like this is a scorner, even if their initial intent is to try to find fault with the points being made for Christian veganism. I believe that good people will diligently consider the points made in this book. Many will choose veganism because it is the only logical approach that aligns with their loving and compassionate natures as Christians. I also believe that many are led to this book, firstly thinking they are going to prove the points wrong, and the Spirit of God will gently work on their hearts and bring them to becoming a Christian vegan themselves. Oftentimes, the people that put up the biggest fights are the ones closest to making the change that they currently rebel against. It is my prayer that this book will be a tool to help bring those compassionate Christians to a new level of compassion by choosing a vegan lifestyle. I believe every Christian wants to be compassionate and loving, not just in word, but also in deed. Partaking of the flesh of animals and using animal-sourced products does not align with that noble goal. James 4:17 says, quote, "Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin." Unquote. Chapter 1. What is veganism? Matthew 5:7 says, quote, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Unquote. Veganism is strict vegetarianism in diet and lifestyle. While vegetarians do not consume any meat, they may consume eggs, dairy, or honey. A strict vegetarian or vegan only eats plants and also does not use any animal source products such as leather, gelatin, wool, silk, honey, etc. Some of the main desires of veganism are to end all animal suffering, animal cruelty, and the exploitation of animals for food, product, or entertainment. These noble goals are rooted in compassion. Veganism is different from being merely a plant-based diet. Veganism does not presume that humans will cause no harm at all to animals, though that is what we strive to do, as if there is presently some utopia that we live in on this planet. The idea is that by your choices as a vegan, your direct contribution to any animal suffering or death will be as minimal as possible. One of the best definitions for veganism is from the Vegan Society, which states that veganism is, quote, "a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of, and cruelty to, animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans, animals, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals." Unquote. The part stating, quote, "as far as is possible and practical," unquote, is very important. This does not mean that you just give in and use animal-sourced products or eat animal flesh when it would be inconvenient to be vegan. The overarching intent you would have as a vegan is to cause zero harm to animals whenever it is possible, and if there are no vegan options available, which is the case in some medicines, then you will choose the least harmful option. I want to expand upon this because I do not want people to think that this definition is leaving room to eat meat here and wear leather there. The idea I am presenting you is that it is impossible to totally eradicate any suffering or death of animals from this planet until the reign of God and Christ on earth. Left to themselves, some animals even harm and kill each other. You could drive down the road and have a deer step in front of your vehicle, causing you to strike them, and the deer may perish. Obviously, you would not have intended to harm the deer, but the accident still occurred and the animal was harmed. This is not the same as if you had plenty of time to swerve away from the deer or stop the vehicle and instead chose to speed up and hit it on purpose. Veganism is not intending to do the impossible and stop any and all harm to animals. Rather, the individual vegan stops their direct contribution to harming animals through their diet, clothing, healthcare, entertainment, and the products they use. Romans 14:23 says, quote, "And he that doubteth is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith, for whatsoever is not of faith is sin." Unquote. The vegan does not accept the appeal to futility, fallacy that many people will cite as an excuse for not becoming a vegan. The appeal to futility fallacy is an argument for essentially giving up on trying to do what is right. The basic definition is that it is a fallacy where a person argues that doing some good thing will not change enough of the world, so it is not worth doing at all. This is not a fallacy used against vegans only, as it is a very common excuse that people use to not do things that they realize they should do. It is a weak attempt to give these people an excuse for not doing the right thing without looking morally bankrupt. Scripturally, any appeal to futility would be destroyed by the following verse. James 4:17 says, quote, "Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin." Unquote. Even if your net impact for good in life is very small, you should still always do the right thing. If no one else is doing it, that should not be a challenge to your resolve. You are moved with compassion and will do the right thing regardless. Doing the right thing for the right reasons is the default behavior for the Christian. Veganism innately appeals to Christians because we are naturally inclined to do the right thing and act from a compassionate heart. I believe that as you listen to this book, you will have the eyes of your understanding enlightened and see how veganism aligns with your most holy Christian faith. I need to be clear that veganism is not contrary to the Bible, Christianity, or righteousness. It is not only compatible, it is God's ideal for mankind. I should also be clear that I am not referring to the religion of veganism which exists amongst some non-Christian vegans. While many of them are truly compassionate people, it seems that a few others have moved toward veganism because of an intense hatred for humans. For these specific few non-Christian vegans, animals become their replacement deity and humans become a hated foe. Among some of these non-Christian vegans, you will often find people trying to rationalize equating humans and animals as having the same inherent value. For these people, notions such as speciesism are commonly promoted. Speciesism is basically the concept of racism, with species replaced for race. In some versions of this notion, it is seen as ethically wrong and speciesist to believe that humans are above animals. I have heard these vegans give illustrations of their mindset toward animals and humans when they say if they had a choice of saving a human baby or a puppy, there would be no obvious decision for them. Saving the puppy would be just as reasonable as saving the human baby because they are equal to these vegans. See Chapter 63, What About Speciesism, for the more reasonable approach to speciesism that most vegans take. I must be clear that concepts like humans being equal to animals only represent a very small but vocal minority of vegans. Concepts like these are also certainly contrary to Christian veganism. You may have run into one of these types due to how vocal they tend to be, but most vegans are compassionate people and are not going around berating non-vegans about things like speciesism. The fringe vegans are more likely to partake of a violent animal rights group that assaults humans or destroys property, such as throwing paint on women wearing furs. Thankfully, this is a very, very small minority among those people who call themselves vegans. The clear majority of vegans, whether they are Christians or not, are compassionate people who want to decrease suffering and misery in the world, not cause more of it. I wanted to address some of these stereotypes of vegans because I know that before I was a vegan, the erroneous pictures I had imagined was of a person who worshipped animals, hated humans, and put a dung beetle's life above a human life. The whole idea of trying to demean humans and bring them to a level at or below animals is often done with a noble goal in mind. Having talked with many of the people promoting this extreme concept of speciesism, I believe that it truly comes down to it being a method they hope will cause humanity's universal notion of the dignity of each human life to be carried over to animals. The reality is probably far different, as I have seen numerous carnists, i.e. humans that eat the flesh of animals, use this same notion of humans being equal to animals as a method of reinforcing their animal flesh-eating ways. One such comment a person made to me on a video from my site, talktoprofit.com, was, quote, "Vegans are weird, animals eat each other and so should we," unquote. I think this is the logical result of holding to the concept of the equality of humans and animals. Instead of bringing animals up to our human level, it drags humans down to the level of brute beasts. Tragically, humans do not need any more excuses for behaving in such a manner. Maybe humanity's merciless behaviour toward animals is because man does not see himself as a steward with dominion over the planet and animals. This low standard of being equal to animals, which man holds himself to, causes him to see no problem acting with such violence and harm to those he shares the planet with. It is my biblical perspective that man is above the animals, and that this is the only approach to take in order to bring about a world where animals are treated with compassion and respect. I base the idea of humans being above animals on the plain observation we can make from nature and specifically the creation story. Genesis 1:26-28 says, quote, "And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." Unquote. Unlike animals, human beings were created in the image and likeness of God. Humans were given dominion over the planet and all life on the planet. The dominion mentioned here is a problem area for many, because often they truly believe that this implies they have an inherent right to inflict cruelty, suffering, and misery on animals. Nothing about this dominion implies causing harm to any other sentient beings that we share the planet with. It was essentially about mankind being placed as the rulers of the planet Earth. As such, mankind could pervert their authority and behave cruelly towards animals and even other humans, but that was never God's ideal for humanity. Proverbs 12:10 says, quote, "A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel." Unquote. The old saying, "Animals are here with us, not for us," has a lot of wisdom behind it. While God's organized universe requires order and hierarchy among his creatures, this does not mean that God's ideal is for mankind to cause suffering or misery to other supposed lower creatures. It is hard to imagine anyone claiming they know and have a personal relationship with the creator of all things, and yet treat other living beings with cruelty, or pay to have others enact such cruelty for them, i.e. animal agriculture. Since most people are so far removed from the lives of the animals they eat, it is easy for them to rationalize eating meat, dairy, and eggs. The closer they examine their sources for animal products, the more likely any reasonable person is to discontinue eating and using animal products. Besides compassion towards other sentient beings, there are many other reasons why people become vegans. Some become vegans because they realize that animal agriculture has a tremendously deleterious environmental impact, including being the main cause of deforestation and much of the cause of water pollution today. From the amount of land used to raise food to feed all the extra animals produced in animal agriculture, to the destruction of rainforests, to the impact on ocean and freshwater health, these are all important environmental reasons to abandon partaking of any animal-sourced products. The fact that in the food fed to animals, about 78% of the protein, nearly 96% of the calories, and 100% of the fiber are wasted to produce animal flesh for consumption shows just how wasteful animal agriculture is. PLOS1 says, quote, "We find that relative to the mean US diet, vegetarian and vegan diets significantly reduce per capita food-borne greenhouse gas emissions, 32% and 67% respectively, blue water use 70% and 75% respectively, and land occupation 70% and 79% respectively, primarily in the form of rangeland. The substitution of 10%, 25% and 50% of ground beef with plant-based burger at the national scale results in substantial reductions in annual US dietary greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption and land occupation." Unquote. Succinctly put, going from a standard meat-eater's diet to a vegan diet decreases pollution, water usage and land usage dramatically. In many cases, it takes numerous vegans to use the same amount of resources as one meat-eater. I'm not making the case for veganism merely from an environmental perspective, but as a steward of God's creation, it is certainly something we should consider. Also, the tremendous number of crops growing strictly to feed the excessive numbers of animals produced in animal agriculture would be enough to feed the entire world's hungry population many times over. Such waste of resources on top of the abuse and misuse of animal life is something to contemplate for a person who truly cares about those in need. Others choose veganism for health reasons. As I mentioned in the introduction, even when I was a child it was well understood that a plant-based diet was an easy way to lose excess body fat when someone was overweight or to keep the fat off once it had been lost. While that is an important health reason for a plant-based diet, another part of that equation is all the disease and illness caused by eating meat, eggs, and dairy. Many have seen reversals in disease as a result of cutting out all animal-sourced foods. While being a good steward of the environment, having more food to feed the hungry, and maintaining optimal health are all good reasons to choose a vegan diet, these are not the reasons for veganism presented in this book. These are side benefits resulting from choosing a compassionate lifestyle of peace and mercy. I have found that when people go vegan for environmental or health reasons, it is very easy for them to go back to eating meat. Look at all the people who smoke, who overeat, and do many things that they know are unhealthy. Health should be very important for people, but the reality is that it is often not enough of a motivator for people to stick with something. Until there is that moral reason backing their choice, veganism can become more of a fad diet to them and not a compassionate lifestyle. This is similar to how you can see celebrities travelling the world on pollution-inducing private planes to lecture people about the virtues of decreasing pollution and saving the environment. Since they have no moral backing for their beliefs, they're quite content hypocritically telling others to save the planet, while they pollute it many magnitudes greater than the average person. When you understand the moral, ethical, and faith-based reasons for choosing to be a vegan, then you will be a vegan for life. A decision made based on the true conviction of a person whose life is ruled by love, compassion, and mercy is a conviction that will be maintained. A decision made based on fleeting emotions, fad diets, environmentalism, or peer pressure will not be very likely to be maintained.